Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season finale of Lethal Weapon as well as the season finale of Bull. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you don't want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about the season finale of Lethal Weapon, you can skip to what I say about the season finale of Bull. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is the season finale of Lethal Weapon. A great season finale. Obviously, what kind of starts us all off is the fact is that someone tries to, take out Riggs, which is interesting, which turns into this whole big thing where it's like, oh yeah, there's a long list of people that Riggs is pissed off. Because it's like, yeah, we kind of got to go out of the box because Riggs is pissed off a lot of people, not just criminals, it's people on a daily basis. I even love that Avery was like, hey, one of our officers was almost attacked. We will not eat, sleep, or make love until we catch the perpetrator. Even have like everyone kind of tilted their head a little bit on that last one, and then Rick starts clapping. It's like everyone's like, "Yeah, that was good. That was good." I was like, "Okay." I was like, "That came out of nowhere," and it's like, "Okay." It was just kind of make him seem. I love the levity of it, because even under these circumstances, everyone's just kind of like, because it's like, "Oh yeah, who could be?" And because I just love the levity of the situation. We're just like, oh yeah, and even Riggs is like, oh yeah, there's that donut shop guy. I'm gonna put him on the list too. All right, donut shop guy. It's like Riggs has that quality about himself of kind of pissing people off. So, but I would really liked about this episode, besides just that overall story, also being the overall other story to it, and that is change. Obviously, Roger is one day away from being captain. I like that he didn't because the last episode we saw, he was kind of deciding whether he was going to take it or not. But it's like, I knew Trish would be a lot more excited about him taking that. And it's also about Riggs, where Molly is asking him to move away, because at the same time, you still have Riggs kind of dealing with his guilt because he has a dream about Miranda being like, come back with me. What happened to the whole, because his whole plan from the very beginning was always to die and be with Miranda. It's like, I'm not supposed to be here without you, but now it's like he's here with Molly and Ben, and he's kind of happy. And Molly's talking about moving back, moving to Texas, and asking him to do the same. And he, thinks about it. Even she was kind of off guard. Like, you're not, usually you freeze or you outright reject. But the fact that you want to think about it is kind of, she's like, I'll take that as progress, So, but in the long run of things, I really like the fact that he busted into that, I think it was a bar with the bike. And the dude's like, what are you doing on my bike? Oh, this is your bike? Did you try to kill me? He's like, no. And then the real killer tried to get away. I like the whole bike chase and stuff like that. But it turns out it wasn't Riggs that the shooter was after, the hitman. It was actually Roger. Because it's all interesting how it all kind of ties together, because this all connects to that rich kind of Nazi dude that they met a couple episodes back. Like, they met a little earlier this season. Turns out Riggs' dad is actually working for him, which what made Riggs go, oh, so you're the one that took the hit out on me? But it's like, no, it wasn't him. I mean, to be fair, it's not that big of a it's not just completely out there to think his dad would do that. I mean, his dad did a lot just to get his attention earlier in the season, so. Because it's interesting, because it all kind of starts with that dude named Alan, because Trish was talking about, yeah, I think Alan's been going into my stuff, so she changes her password. That ends up kind of setting everything in motion, because she ended up blocking him because he's actually laundering money from their law firm. Because he represents that dude that, Nathan's also working with too, because they're kind of all in that same area and workspace essentially. So, which is kind of interesting. And because of that, Alan's the one who took a hit out on Roger, I guess, to kind of get him out of the way. So maybe use that to kind of get close to Trish so that he can, get the passwords and stuff like that. But nevertheless, doesn't work out because Nathan's like, well, why do I need you if she's the one with all the passwords? So he kills her and he kills Alan and kidnaps Trish, which kind of sends Roger kind of spiraling. Because it's so interesting, because Roger kind of felt bad about, being captain, because it would mean that he wouldn't be out in the field anymore. Because obviously he was hoping for this heartfelt moment between him and Riggs, and it's like, Riggs is like, yeah, I kind of heard about it. Who cares? He's like, what? He's like, all the stuff that we've been through these past 2 years, it don't mean diddly squat to you. I got this book of our adventure, our memories and stuff like that. And Riggs is kind of like, I got it all up here, which is like, Riggs' way of being sentimental in his own right. But for Roger, it's like, oh, it's because Trish was like, it's like, oh, the kids could have been home, or Trish could have been home when the assassin tried to get him in their house. But it's like, she's like, thankfully this will all be done because he won't be in the field anymore. Like I said, it's something that Trish would always want. She won't have to worry every day about him living that type of life, because as captain, he's typically going to be behind the desk most times, which it finally hits Roger in this episode. He's like, right. Because even though he always wanted to be captain and stuff like that, he kind of liked doing this because this is what he's done for so long, getting out there, being able hands-on with the investigation and stuff, even working with Riggs, everything's changing around him, because Riggs is thinking about it more so from the perspective of like, kind of like, can he really move on? It's kind of like his side of the story, whereas you have Roger, it's like everything's changing and how will he handle it himself? It's just kind of an interesting balance of like both of them going through changes but going down about different, like their changes are affecting them differently, and they kind of have to go about handling it different ways in a sort of sense. So, but to kind of get Trish back, you have Riggs using his half brother Garrett as bait. And then you have that bastard Nathan saying all the stuff, being like, you should let me go when this is all said and done, because that girl, Molly and her son, Ben, I can come get them at any point in time if I wanted to. So, but Riggs wasn't going to let him go because of what he said, I'm sure. And also just being the piece of crap person Nathan is. So it turns into a fight. Part way into it's not unfair because the other two start jumping into the fight as well. So Garrett almost gets the upper hand, but Roger came back through. It's almost interesting, too, because he ended up, Roger's the reason why for one, Riggs saved Roger by having that spare grenade around. Sadly, it blew up Riggs' trailer, so that's no more. Kind of even more reason to leave now. And then also, Riggs bashed Nathan in the head. But before, Riggs could bash his head in, Roger stopped him. Because it's something that, he had talked about with Cahill and I thought was kind of neat, was because of the fact is he just couldn't let go. Because ever since he didn't kill his dad, he's been wishing every day that he had killed his dad when he had the chance. Because he knew his dad was up to no good. And she's like, how can you tell? He's like, because I saw his eyes. Those look like the eyes of a man who wants to kill. The fact of the matter is that he's like a reptile. Those eyes are cold and focused, and it's like, you don't forget the eyes of the person who wanted to kill you. He's like, the look in his dad's eyes then, he sees it now. That's why he knew his dad was kind of up to no good. So, which kind of proved the point that I thought, his dad hadn't changed. I figured that was, it was all a ploy. Like he brought up the, wasn't that last episode, the whole situation of he could potentially be manipulating Riggs to get him out of prison early, that whole situation. And he's like, was that part of the plan and stuff like that? Which Nathan didn't say anything, but I kind of figured it was. Makes you wonder if things hadn't played out the way they did, where would they be? Nathan would still be up here doing criminal stuff and he'd be getting away, but I think Riggs would still never let him get away. He would have always tried to keep an eye on Nathan just because he wouldn't be able to just let him go. But Cahill's biggest advice was because his biggest regret is what happened back then. He blames himself and everything, but she gets him to understand, you were a 12-year-old kid. He was your dad. He was supposed to protect you. That was all his fault. You have nothing to kind of be sorry for, that you were a kid back then. But for him, I guess just in his mind, he blames himself for everything that his dad has done. I guess did back then as well as subsequently has done. And he kind of takes that all on himself because for him, it's because still that aspect of Riggs not being able to move on because of everything associated with his dad, because it's like, how can I move on with Molly and Ben? Because if I go to Texas, that situation with my dad's just going to follow me there. And Cahill's just kind of like, you have to forgive yourself most of all, not just for Molly and Ben's sake, but also for your own sake, so that you can move on with your life. So, but I think it's a good thing that Roger did stop him. It's give and take, because taking him out would be good because maybe that would protect Riggs and the Ben and Molly in the future. But to be fair, who's to say that there won't be retaliation for him killing Nathan, So, and besides, I think it's also because Roger didn't want Riggs to do that, because it wouldn't be out of self-defense. It'd just be outright murder. And the fact of the matter is, it would never sit right with a person like Riggs. So he didn't want Riggs to have that blood on his hands. So. And it's kind of nice because it's also symbolic too, because Jake kind of took that out of Riggs' hands back then, and so Roger kind of took it out of his hands this time. To be fair, Riggs stopped himself last time because for him, it's like, yeah, that's no matter what the circumstances are. I'm a 12-year-old and that was my dad. So that's what stopped him now. But like, he kind of sees his dad for the monster that he is. So he wasn't going to make that mistake again, but still. But this seemed like it was kind of goodbye. They threw the party and everything. Trish was thanking Riggs because it's like, if it wasn't for you, like you kept him coming back to me all the time. And, he's not very good at goodbyes. He says it to Cahill, but he's like, no. Even when I'm going, we can still talk, So that was kind of a sweet moment. And even between him and Roger's like, lift up the mustache, say something. Go ahead, say I love you. And he's just kind of like, he was glad because Riggs changed his life. Yes, not always for the best. Like, he made things kind of crazy and painstaking, but like he brought a good balance to Roger's life. And he does finally say to Roger, thank you for saving my life. He's like, on the beach. He's like, no, that's not what I meant. And it's like, yeah, like if it wasn't Roger and his family is the reason why Riggs is still here. Like, he would have given up so long ago if he didn't have someone like Roger and the Murtaughs in his life. I even love like Rihanna being like, oh, you should have snuck it. Like when Riggs was trying to sneak out, she's like, you should have snuck out the laundry room. That's what I did. And then Trish looks at her and he's just like, and then Riggs is like, man, I'm glad there's going to be someone here that can, give Roger hell while I'm gone. So even had that bittersweet moment. He's going to say goodbye to Miranda. Like, no matter what the circumstances are, I will always love you and you'll always be with me, that he's never going to just forget her, so he never thought he'd be where he is. And it's like, oh, you're taking those steps towards happening. I was like, how is this going to end on a cliffhanger or something? And it's like, Garrett shows up. I'm like, is this going to be like a brotherly thing? And it's like, nope, he pulls off a gun and shoots him. And the fact is, he didn't shoot him multiple times and stuff like that makes me go, I immediately go back to it before. Like, Garrett said it the first time, like before he went into the coma and everything. It's like, he didn't want to do it. Much like Riggs, I'm sure he was kind of forced in this whole situation too. Like, Nathan tried to paint it like, oh, no, I wanted him away from this life. It's like you probably put him neck deep in this life yourself, trying to pretend like you've changed, but you haven't, because you've been orchestrating even things. Because we've seen already that you orchestrate stuff from prison. So I guarantee you he's the one. I doubt Garrett would do that because Garrett had his freedom. Like, why would he do that? Not unless it's like, oh, you arrested my dad again. But the look on his face looked like he didn't want to do it. And especially considering Riggs is his brother, I think it is because like Nathan was like, you do this for me, boy, you do it. So it's also that doctor's fault too, because she's the one that kind of put this all in Riggs' mind too, because she's like, oh, if it was my dad, it's like, you should have shut your mouth. You shouldn't even put that in Riggs' head in the first place. Like, I mean, to be fair, once again, no matter what the circumstances may be, even if he was in like back in Texas, he'd still be causing problems for Riggs. Like I said, his connections and everything. So you have Riggs laying there, like right next, which is almost foreshadowing, interestingly enough, because he saw it at the beginning. He was at the graveyard. He had the gun to his own head. Like, he's right there beside Miranda, potentially about to die. So it's just kind of like that opening was foreshadowing this very moment. I mean, not necessarily the same manner, but still, which it just sucked because he was on his way to happiness. And obviously you hear like the call go out on the radio. So like, obviously Roger's responding. So a very powerful season finale. And it's like, where will things go from here? I don't know if the show is getting renewed for a third season. I really hope so, especially with something like that, because that also means things with his dad aren't settled. I mean, to be fair, it's kind of interesting because the whole Flores situation, it's like they left on the cliffhanger and then like it was dealt with at the beginning of this season. So I'm curious, are they going to do that same thing? Like, what's going to happen here? Like, Garrett did shoot him. It might be a situation where when the time comes, Riggs couldn't like get him locked up again, but Riggs goes, no, it wasn't him. Or, is that going to be an overarching story of like potentially season 3, him dealing with that and also his dad? Is Garrett kind of running things now while their father is behind bars again? Will Riggs finally have to because I was kind of thinking with everything kind of playing out the way it was, I kind of had a feeling it wasn't actually going to be Riggs who would put his dad down. I thought it was going to be Roger, which I wonder, would that actually piss Riggs off more if Roger actually... I mean, he didn't get pissed when Roger stopped because I think he was kind of okay with it. But if Roger was the one who actually killed his dad instead of him, would that make him feel better? I feel like ultimately that's where it would go down anyway. Like, I feel like the only way to stop this would be him dying. So, I mean, I don't know. I'd be interested to see what they would do with the season 3. I'm also curious, like, what that would mean going forward for him and Molly and Ben. Would he push them away? Will he pull them in closer because he wouldn't want them to get in danger? Like, also, what would this mean for the move? You know, would we come back immediately after season two's finale, like picking up right there? Or would we get like a time skip, him in Texas, Roger in his new captain position, maybe do like a time skip thing, and we see things aren't necessarily the way we thought it would be, like him in a captain position, Riggs in Texas or something like that, you know? A lot of stuff I'm kind of interested to see how like it would play out if it came back for a third season. Cause like I said, this might be something they deal with like immediately in the premiere of season 3, like they did the Flores situation, but I don't know. Or maybe it kind of be a continuous thing even into season 3, you know, so. Because that could also be a storyline in itself, too. Obviously, like, Roger deciding, like, oh, no, I'm not going to take you, making any excuse not to take the captain's chair. Like, oh, we got to find a person who shot Riggs. And then it could be like a storyline between him and Trish, or Trish being like, no. You said after you solved who shot Riggs, you take the cap. It's like, no, now you're still being directly involved in the cases. That also probably mean we'd probably see more Bowman and Bailey taking things over, potentially. Or, like, it's something else, too. We'd probably see, like, Riggs with a new partner, potentially, if Riggs stuck around. Like I said, it would depend. I don't know. It depend on what they would do with season 3. Those are kind of ideas I'm kind of throwing out there. So, like I said, I'm really hoping that they do renew it for a third season. So. And now moving on to the season finale of Bull. A great season finale, obviously picking up right where last week's episode left off with Elliot's trial. Interestingly enough, we immediately get, the guilty verdict. It's kind of interesting, too, because, like, Bull's kind of been, obviously spiraling a little bit. He was even dreaming about, he kind of comes and sweeps Izzy off her feet and starts making out with her. The bridesmaids move the flowers from the table, because I thought they were like, they were moving it just so, like, when they get to the table and stuff like that. I mean, they never got to the table, but I guess that was just to make sure they did not the plan out. But part of me, in my back of my brain, it's like, maybe she's doing it because she's like, give them the table. It's like, no, that's just me being me. Sadly, turns out to be a dream. I was like, because I'm surprised Izzy would just be okay with that. Obviously, it just kind of stems from what she had said to Bull about him not being alone, and he just kind of wanted to kind of, because he didn't fight for them before, and this time, I guess, in his dream, he's hoping that, maybe if he fought for her now, maybe he can change her mind. I mean, that probably just caused more problems, so obviously he didn't act upon it, just the dream and everything, but still. So a week has gone by, and now it comes down to sentencing. Basically, the jury's going to be the ones to decide whether or not, I mean, he's already got the guilty verdict. It's up to them now to decide, being presented with all this stuff, whether or not Elliot deserves to live or die. And it's kind of sad because Elliot basically has to sit there, and Bull's telling him to look remorseful, even though he has to act remorseful for something he didn't do. Because if he doesn't, then everyone's just going to, because, I mean, obviously, and it's something Benny kind of talks about later on, it's like, he's so angry, which is like, he has the right to be angry. He's like, he's going to die for a crime he didn't commit. And he's like, no one else is willing to see it. And obviously, Bull and Benny try to pull some stuff here and there in the court, which pisses the judge off, and she starts getting pissed at Benny, putting him in contempt, even giving him, because basically they're only supposed to like listen to the testimony, but their testimony is kind of like still trying to play at that game of like, this isn't for like, there's no longer trying to prove his innocence or guilt. It's just trying to it's supposed to be an emotional thing, which kind of ties into the episode, interestingly enough, because it's like tax system won't really help them in this case, because usually that's kind of determining how people are going based on facts. This whole situation is based on emotions. They've already heard all the facts. They kind of already made up their mind to a certain extent. Now it comes down to an emotional thing, whether they're sympathetic and believe Elliot and choose not to let him die, or they're just like, no, he died. It's more of an emotional thing that ultimately determines whether or not, he gets sentenced to death or not. And that's something that, emotions aren't something that you can really 100% calculate for. So that was kind of an interesting reason for the attack. And it makes very much sense why the the system can't be used, the algorithm in particular can't be used for this. But going to it, it's a situation of Bull starts figuring everything out. It's like suddenly the prosecutor gets like a ring, and it's like, you got the wrong guy. And it's like, They never explained it, but part of me wondered, was that because basically, if it turns out there's a serial killer who's behind all this, like, everything's a little methodical, like, everything was planned out. It wasn't just kind of like, because they make it seem like it was almost like a crime of passion, but it's like, no, like, this wasn't something that was just, because it was like, everyone wants to make it seem like this crime was in the heat of a moment, but it's like, no, everything was planned out. And interestingly enough, the lady who says she saw Elliot actually didn't see him because she didn't have her glasses on, and she mentioned that the dude walked away with a limp. Elliot doesn't have a limp. But the guy who sold Elliot the truck and everything did, because that turns out to be part of the plan. That's the reason why stealing the truck wasn't part of the plan, but the killer got injured, so they needed a way to get out quickly. Hence why they got the car and why they gave it to Elliot. I don't know if they had the sole purpose of framing Elliot the entire time. It was probably just kind of like he had to kind of change things up, framing Elliot was kind of a last minute decision because it's like, I need to get rid of this truck because it's evidence. So that's why it all kind of went down the way it did. So, I mean, sadly, the judge wasn't willing to let Benny her get back on the stand to kind of bring that up because like I said, I feel like it's a little stupid that things can't operate like that. It's like, no, there's new evidence, but it's like, it's not evidence. It's just kind of little speculation and things that it's not truth. It's not 100% fact. So all it would do is, this isn't meant to be like, because the whole point is to try and get the jury to hear things that might shift their opinion, which is kind of the point of all of this. But at the same time, it's like, it can't be something that can be meant to try and persuade them in such it's such a weird gray area that I thought that's kind of crazy. But I love when Bull was trying to explain, like, oh yeah, the guy obviously being, it's like, oh, trying to pick out the serial killer and stuff like that. And Chunks he's like, oh yeah, this guy doesn't have real attachments to the people around him. And you have Chunk coughing, sounds just like you. And then they start breaking it down more and more. And you even see Benny kind of giving Chunk a look and Chunk kind of shrugging. I guess it's because, like, I guess because Bull's not being willing to see it. Because he talks about kind of being, oh, so narcissistic. They're just so great. It's like, that kind of fits you to a T too. So I guess on some level, Bull is kind of a psychopath. I think even he'd probably admit it. Just in his, he's kind of narcissistic. I think a lot of the facets of what would make a psychopath kind of fit his character. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I even love that Chunk had to confront his teacher, Professor Jameson, because Professor Jameson was kind of stubborn about it. He's like, no. It isn't like, oh, I don't have to spin everything in a fancy way. I just have to tell them the facts. The jury will listen. But Chunk had to be like, no, you idiot. You're good in your field, sure, but this is my wheelhouse. Just shut up and follow. He's kind of basically like spin it like a story. And obviously at first it didn't click with Jameson, but eventually partway into it, he used the word that Chunk said use, and he was like psychopath, and it got everyone's attention. Oh, and he's like, let me tell you a story. I'm like, yeah. It's like, I love that because even it comes and works out in the end because he's the one that kind of, I'm sure, played it. Obviously, it still kept kind of getting Benny in trouble, but it spun things in a way to kind of make people realize, like, oh yeah, this was done by a psychopath. The evidence that was kind of saying, like, oh yeah, this was the ring that was turned in was a keepsake. I don't know if they explained that. Maybe they did, and I kind of missed it. But did they ever explain that was the wife that turned that stuff in, or was it him himself? I feel like it had to be the wife who ended up being the one, because Bull ended up confronting her later on, and he was like, you came across something of your husband's, something that just wasn't quite right, and it kind of made your worst fears come true. So she knew on some level that he was, but she didn't want to admit it. This is the man that you love. No one wants to see that, admit their like kind of terrible side to him. So it was just kind of interesting. So I don't remember them saying exactly that, but I assumed that was it because I was wondering, is it the killer? It was like, no, the killer wouldn't flaunt that. So I assumed it was her. She turned into evidence trying to help, But Bull visiting her that night made her realize, like, this would just be one more person that's a victim of your husband. It's like, you're scared, but it's like, we'll find someone to protect you. And so she does turn him in. And, because Elliot was kind of about to make things bad, because for him, it's like, Benny's telling him to be remorseful when he kind of gives his testimony, do whatever he can to kind of make it so they don't push for him to die. But he was like, I didn't do it. But, but when it's all said and done, I love the courtroom reactions to, ooh, the kind of like, courtroom drama stuff. So I do appreciate that. And it is like Wayne was arrested by the FBI. It took about 10 minutes and he confessed to it all. And it's like Elliot's free. And it's like, thank goodness. And you see the tears in his eyes and everything. It's so beautiful. Because what's also interesting about this whole situation too is like Marissa was going to leave because she's visiting her. She goes to her therapist. And he made her realize something because basically she was very dependent all her life because because of her whole situation growing up, obviously she was very dependent. Didn't really want to rely on anyone. So she kind of did everything herself. But like the thought of being codependent kind of like everything that like you becoming everything there is for someone, that someone else's happiness is tied to your own. But now she's kind of on the opposite end with Bull, where all of her happiness is tied, like all of his happiness, all her happiness is tied to his, rather than kind of being vice versa, because she kind of has to take care of him, do all these things because he's messy. But her therapist kind of points out, like, aren't you actually kind of glad? Like, you get satisfaction because he is so messy, because I guess, you know, it makes her feel needed, like, you know, that she gets swept up in all of this because she needs him, that she can't be herself without Bull, without her work, because it's kind of all there is to her, and it's like there's nothing left for everything outside of her life. So she wrote a note to Bull, she was going to leave, and she was like, but the fact of the matter is I can leave whenever you need me to. But seeing Bull go to work, it made her, I guess, almost nostalgic, and made her realize she got to see the man that she's so proud of. Because the reason why she's so tough on him is because she's like, I know what you're capable of, and I don't want to see you do any less than that, you know? But because of that, she ripped up the letter, and it's like she's not leaving, because she didn't let anyone know that she was going to do that. She put it somewhere just, I guess, in case Bull just stumbles across it. Like, he'd eventually open his drawer and find the letter, but she destroyed. I wasn't expecting it. I was thinking, like, oh, wow, this is going to end with Marissa. Like, maybe we'll see something in the future, like, I mean, it's kind of interesting considering the whole, like, Cable situation this season, too. I was like, oh, wow, they're going that direction. Like, oh, but she's kind of leaving permanent. Because she's like, I wasn't sure about anything, but she's like, there's a lot of things she's not sure about, but this decision was one thing she felt like she was sure about. So that was kind of an interesting development. But her backing down and just tearing up the letter because she's like, nope. You know, because I think seeing Bull kind of be better about things, I think seeing that kind of made her kind of change her mind. I was like, no, he's still the great man. I know he might have his flaws and his problems, but I'm glad to stick by his side through it all. So it was also interesting too, kind of on the good side of things. You had Chunk being told, his professor is like, yo, tell Chunk I'd love him to come, you know, talk about trial science at one of my classes. I'm like, yo, things have kind of turned around. It's like, yo. And I love it because it's like, even Jameson admitted, it's like, yeah, I finally see, you know, he saw the benefits of it. He saw what it can do. Like, he saw firsthand, like, oh, what was happening with the jury before when he was just exciting fast. But the moment he kind of did what Chunk said, because Chunk is really good at what he does. And you know, and that's what Bull was kind of thankful. And it's like, the team is the reason why this has happened, because of Benny and everyone putting in their hard work. Obviously, everyone doing all that they can in this case led to things being where they are. So the team coming through in the end, getting Elliot his life back and everything. That's so beautiful. And then it ends on kind of like a whoa note of Bull having a heart attack and having to call his own ambulance. So the moment he sat down, because it looked like I was like, is he in trouble? Like, is he short on breath? I was like, and he's leaning. I was like, is he about to pass out? Is he having a heart attack? And it's like, yep. So that's interesting. Which that could be I'm very interested to see what that means going forward. I mean, obviously, because like a big thing going forward, I'll admit it at the time of recording this, I don't know if this is going to be renewed for a third season. I hope so, because I'd love to see what they do with it. I'd love to see what kind of trials and stuff they go through next season, but also what that would mean for Bull, because I feel like this is going to be the tipping point where Bull's going to really have to change. And Marissa, I mean, will Marissa like actually leave next season? Will she actually kind of threaten to leave to kind of get him to change? Will she kind of push for, like, you know, what exactly is going to go down, you know? Because obviously, like, this team is always kind of on a tipping point because of the way Bull is. So it is type of thing of like, things have to change. But if Bull changes, I don't know, will the team operate the same way? Him being the way he is kind of like a key component to this team. Like, everyone else brings something to the team, and he brings his whole thing, which causes problems, sometimes probably more problems than it does good. But it does make you wonder, like, what season 3 would have in store for him, especially when it comes to the whole love life situation. Like I said, there's the whole, once again, I always blank on it, because it's like Jill Flint's character, was it Diane or Diana? I think it's Diane. Might be Diana, I think. Like I said, we just left their situation being where it is. Oh, it's like flirtations and stuff like that, but nothing happened. Maybe stuff between him and Izzy. Izzy can pick up. I mean, to be fair, she probably went ahead and got married. I mean, she was getting married soon, but I don't know if they specified when exactly. So whether it was like super, super soon. So I'm interested to see what that happened. I mean, we did see him kind of rekindle with an ex this season, but at the same time, it is kind of like that, what she said, like, oh, you're not good at being alone. So maybe we'll see him kind of drop his barriers and kind of get closer to the team. Might be see something. Because even now, he does keep the team at a distance. It is kind of like a professional, non-professional relationship. He keeps it very professional with everybody, you know. Even as close as he is to Marissa, I think even he still keeps her at a distance, even though he relies on her so heavily, you know. So I don't know. Those are just kind of some of my thoughts. I'd like to kind of wondering what season 3 would kind of be all about. So, and like I said, each season kind of throws in more stories for some of the other characters that are part of Tact. So I'm very interested to see what other stories we can learn from everybody else. Maybe some more stuff for what's the dude that arrested Cable this season that Danny went to about it, but he's like, oh, you owe me. Like he kind of owed her because she saved his life. What's his name? Like Harrison. Like any more of that, because we haven't seen him since the whole Cable situation. So I don't know whether like Danny is avoiding him subsequently since kind of that betrayal and everything. So Chunk's student storyline. So we're going to see him probably play. He could potentially play a much bigger role as a lawyer. We might see him and Benny kind of interchange a lot more. Like, so maybe Chunk might try and take on more roles next season. Potentially. I mean, that could be something we see too, like everyone playing different roles, like for one episode or something. I think this would be a perfect show to kind of have something like that go down. But like I said, those are just my thoughts. Really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode, though. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good